And next up, part 2 of Paul Jensen's story. His wife, Tiffany, had been praying for years because Paul had been a good man, but he was stubborn, self-willed, and kind of had one foot in trying to be a Christian and one foot in the world. And he describes himself as a self-described, very selfish, egotistical, self-willed man. And so his wife is pressing in through the years, praying for something huge to happen, So Paul believes that the veils of time were able to slip back and that protective hedge removed just for a little bit for the enemy to come in and give him that circumstances took over and that it was true spiritual dynamics took place. So Paul, you believe that because of your wife's prayer, you were allowed to be catapulted over this cliff.
Yes, well, I didn't know about my wife's prayer until after I was catapulted off the cliff, but yes.
This was huge.
It was huge. It took something dramatic. I believe God's protective covering, he removed that from me for an instant of time. And then at the time that the actual impact should have absolutely killed me, that protective covering came back. All as a part of his plan to teach me, a very stubborn, egotistical, driven person. It would take an event such as this to really wake me up.
But it didn't work.
It didn't work. It did not work. I viewed that God had always protected me in my partying years, that he was protecting me now, and why change, right? Wow, it in fact almost empowered me even further to think I can do whatever I want to do. God's going to be there like a big brother watching my back. And because of that, 5 weeks later, that protective covering was removed again when I was rear-ended at a stoplight by a youth pastor who was going to use the funds from selling his car to fund his missionary work. So the devil got 2 birds with 1 stone that day, and everything that I held dear just collapsed in that seat, because when you get concussion on top of a concussion, it can become very, very serious. And essentially, I had very strong traumatic brain injury, and it was interesting. God allowed me to keep all that I needed, be able to work, all my mental functions, everything, except he took away the thing that I held most dear, which was my personal self-worth based upon my physical prowess, my strength, everything that I wanted to do in that respect was removed. So all of us have something in life that we held very dear to us, whether it's finances or family, it's our job, it's our car, it's our hair, or whatever it may be. Yeah. I have to laugh. But for this, for me, it was kind of my own personal self-worth of how people viewed me on a physical sense.
So you went through a lot of suffering.
I went through significant suffering. I'd spiraled down, and I kind of blamed why God. Here's a guy who was actually saved in a modern-day miracle, that the miracles you read about in the Bible happened to me. And now I realize, I feel like my miracle has been crushed, and I'm angry. I was angry for weeks. And finally I got to the point where I couldn't accept it, I couldn't understand it, but I finally just said, I give it up to you, God. I finally just got to the point, I was broken, I was crying on my stairs to my wife, going, I'm no longer a man. I don't feel like a man, because all the stuff that I defined me, right? Remember all my media, all the stuff that I had tried to aspire to be was just crushed, and I just realized I am no longer. So, okay, God, it's up into your hands, and I'll follow you, and I'll trust in you. And that's when the healing started to occur. And through pain and suffering, and then perseverance, and then patience, I finally was able to, over a year, finally be able to come out of that and learn kind of how I really am supposed to live.
And how is that? How are you supposed to live?
Well, I'm very humbled now. I'm the opposite. In fact, I feel very undeserving to be alive today. I feel like this story and the long story that I have is not something that I deserve to share. So this is really just God's story coming through. And I'll just serve him and do whatever I need to be, and be the proper husband and father and man that I need to be. And that's not egotistical. That's not serving the world. And through that lesson, I've been very blessed.
So you learn to draw upon God as your source and your strength. And in that process of appropriating those promises, you began to have a new nature formed in you.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't proud or egotistical.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And yet you were a man who was heavily consumed by entertainment before all this. And now you find yourself back in this entertainment industry because your job is working for Microsoft Xbox, right?
Yeah, well, I was working for Microsoft at the time during the accident afterwards, and then right after my healing process occurred, I was actually recruited away, and I went to be a vice president at Sony Pictures Digital. So I actually moved down, lived in Beverly Hills, and worked in Hollywood, and I was immersed into the dream machine, the machine that I had admired for a decade and a half, and I was able to, I smiled because God brought me to that world to see how it is after I had finally been able to get my, I guess, proper bearing in life and kind of learn to draw upon God instead of looking for the media to define who I was. And it was a very eye-opening experience.
How do you encapsulate to our audience this thing that you call the dream machine? What it is, its impact, and how to get the heck out of it?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the average American watches 28 hours of television a week. That's the average American, which is stunning. If you think about how much we are exposed. I mean, I love the Discovery Channel. I love nature shows. So not all TV is bad. In fact, TV there's many.
And there's the hardest.
We tend to think TV's pretty good, actually.
Exactly. But there are shows that kind of help define what our culture is. I laughed. There was a BMW commercial when I was in Beverly Hills that said, "Buy this BMW and think what your friends will think of you now." Right?
Ow.
And it just made me laugh, and it made me go, "Oh, I can't believe it actually happened," because it's a way that. With so many commercials and so many, it sets our culture. It sets our society today in terms of what we are supposed to aspire, what we're supposed to buy, what are we supposed to live in, who are we supposed to be, what kind of morals we should have. It's actually shaping our Western culture in a broader way than I think we even realize.
So we're buying the lie.
We are.
$165 billion or something like that spent in advertisement?
Per year. Yes.
Per year. And so we're
just in the U.S.
So we're swallowing and buying the lie.